Welcome everyone to Star Wars Makes Things Better. In this episode, we've got a Stormtrooper showdown. We're going to be taking a look at the Imperial Stormtrooper and the First Order Stormtrooper, and we're going to decide which one of these two Black Series figures is best. Let's start off with the Imperial Stormtrooper. So we take a look at the Imperial Stormtrooper's helmet to begin with. There's a lot of good things that they've got going on here. The details are nice, the blue vents on the side of the blue markings, and then the vent on the side of his cheek. The eyes are pretty good. I do think that the eyes could be just a little bit bigger, but you can see quite a bit of detail even in the chin right here. These little greeblies, if you will, have a nice shine to them. You can even see it picks up nice in the camera a little bit here, but very good sculpt overall. Like it quite a bit. The one drawback that I will say is that with this particular figure, I think that the white could be a little shinier. There's no weathering to this particular figure, but I think the white could be a little bit shinier, and that depends on the paint that they've used. Now, I will also say this particular Stormtrooper is one of the first that they released, so that could have something to do with the plastic that they used. It could have something to do with why it's not as shiny, but overall, a really nice sculpt on that head. Now, let's take a look at the First Order Stormtrooper. Now let's set aside any feelings you may have, positive or negative, towards the sequel trilogy and how Disney is done with the sequel trilogy. And let's just take a look at this sculpt here. Really nice sculpt. The eyes are good. The size of the eyes are good. You've got the black and white contrast. I think this head sculpt is very, very accurate. You've got the little greebly right here on the front, and I like the way that this looks. This particular sculpt is really nice, and when it comes to the head sculpts, if I'm being extremely honest here, I think that I would give the nod to the First Order Stormtrooper over the Imperial Stormtrooper. Just barely, but I really do think I'd give the nod to the First Order Stormtrooper. All right. So let's continue here, and let's take a look at their body sculpts. So some of the nice things about the Imperial Stormtrooper. The midsection here is great. I'm going to pull apart his arm so that we can see the chest plate as well. This body sculpt is pretty spot on. Love all this right here in the middle. The belt looks really good. The undersuit, if you will, the jumpsuit underneath, I think that looks really sharp, and his boots are really good as well. You've got the two different kneecaps, if you will, this one here and this one here. Overall, a really, really nice sculpt. And on the back, one of the things I love about the back of this figure is you've even got the little canister on the back and a spot for his gun as well, the holster for his gun as well. So overall, I think the body is pretty great for this. Couple of little things as I'm looking at this figure as well. Sometimes what you find with these figures is the proportions are just a little bit off. Maybe the torso is a little bit long, maybe the neck doesn't sit just right, but for this one, this Stormtrooper is pretty spot on. I'm very, very happy with the way that they sculpted this Stormtrooper. And again, thinking back, this is one of the first figures that they released in this Black Series line. I'm giving this one top marks for the Imperial Stormtrooper. Now let's take a look at the First Order Stormtrooper. So not quite as much detail. If we look at his chest, you've got this right here. It's more of a barrel. This is just a personal preference. I think it's pretty accurate. This figure is accurate, but I'm not so sure I like this sculpt compared to the Stormtrooper sculpt that we've got, the Imperial Stormtrooper sculpt that we've got back there. The arms look very nice. There is There are little details that are on there, like buttons or clips or things like that. And you've got the legs too. If we lift up his arms, let's take these arms apart as well. Take his gun out of his hand, blaster. And when we look at the midsection, it looks good. But the belt is just not, it's just not up to snuff, if you ask me. This belt just doesn't look as nice as it does on the Imperial Stormtrooper. We still have the canister on the back, which is okay, but no holster either. And I just am, yeah, this is okay. It's a good sculpt, not a great sculpt. And if I put his blaster back in his hand and we put him back over here so that we can see them side by side, in this particular case, I definitely need to give the nod. There we go. I definitely need to give the nod to the Imperial Stormtrooper for sure. I just think that not only is his armor, not only is it a better design, it's a better look as well. I just really like that look as opposed to the First Order Stormtrooper. All right, let's take a look at the accessories now, and in particular, let's take a look at the blasters. So on top here, we've got the Imperial Stormtrooper blaster, and on the bottom, we've got the First Order Stormtrooper blaster. The biggest difference that we see is that the Imperial Stormtrooper blaster is all black, and then for the First Order Trooper, it's black and white. And that really is the biggest thing that stands out to me when I look at these two blasters. The First Order Stormtrooper blaster, it looks like something out of a video game. It looks like something that you might customize in a Call of Duty game with diamonds and purple and everything else, and it's just not, it doesn't look like something that should be in the world of Star Wars. You know, one of the things that drew many people to Star Wars is it looked like it was a world that was lived in. It looked like it was a world that was real, and that people can relate to and say, yes, I can believe that. This blaster on the bottom, this First Order blaster, I just can't believe it. I don't think that we would see two-tone blasters in the world of Star Wars. So that's a problem that I have. The accuracy of both of these are pretty good. I do think that the Imperial Stormtrooper blaster probably could benefit from maybe a little bit of texturing or a little bit of contrast, maybe a little bit of silver somewhere on it. Not crazy like on the First Order scope up here. I do like the contrast of the black and the silver. It's just the white that I just can't get into. If we turn these two blasters around and take a look at them from the other side, we can see, let's get a good look right about there. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to see with this camera, but we'll do the best that we can. There, let's focus in a little bit more. We're still focused on the back, so let's get these guys out of the way. There we go, and now we can focus a little bit better with our camera. Not a bad, like I said, not a bad sculpt on either one of these, but I do hate the fact that sometimes these blasters, they bend on these toys, and if you keep them in one spot for too long, they just aren't straight. And so sometimes that happens while they're in the box with the way that the packaging is, but overall, I think we can get this in a good place. So there's the two blasters, and I've got to give a nod to one of the two, and it's got to go to the Imperial Stormtrooper blaster, mainly because of the colors. So that's the accessories. Now let's kind of come back and look at the posability of these two figures. If you have an action figure of any kind that has a blaster or a gun of some sort, you want to be able to put them in a pose similar to this. You want to be able to have them aiming down their sights. And with both of these figures, what you see is it's really difficult to get their arms in a position where it looks like they're aiming down the sight. So on the First Order Stormtrooper over here on the right, this is about as close as I could get him to aiming his blaster. And if you're like me and you take pictures of your toys, you really have to angle things in a crazy way to try and make it look as if the trooper is aiming down the sights. And this is just, I've tried many times with this particular figure, and it just isn't that great when it comes to aiming down the sights. Now, I can't give high marks to the Imperial Stormtrooper either, because when we look at the Imperial Stormtrooper, you can get his arms just a little bit closer, but not very close. If we look at these from the top, you can see that the Imperial Stormtrooper can get his right arm just a little bit closer to his body than the First Order Stormtrooper, but it's still not all that close, and it makes it very difficult to make it look like you're aiming down the sights. Now, one thing that I will give a nice touch to the Imperial Stormtrooper is this. His helmet and his neck, let me see if I can get in there. It's kind of hard to see. But on his neck, you can shift his helmet forwards and backwards. So if I look right here, I can shift it back, or I can shift it kind of down like that. So if we bring it down and over, it looks a little bit strange from my angle, looking from over top of the camera, but it looks a little bit better at the with the camera angle that you see right there. Not a ton better, but it is just a little bit. That's a nice touch with the neck that gives you just a little bit more posability when it comes to aiming down the sights. Now, when it comes to standing in some dynamic poses, let's start with the First Order Stormtrooper. You know, we can turn his legs just a little bit, and we can kind of aim him to the side, the torso twist a little bit. But the strange thing is he doesn't turn at the waist. And so we're trying, you know, I'm trying to turn him at the waist, and it really doesn't work. So it's just his upper body that can turn. And so there's a little bit, we can get him in a little bit more dynamic pose. That looks a little bit better than just standing straight up and down. But overall, not the greatest figure to put into a pose, mainly because of the arms. The feet are pretty good, and we've got a little bit, we can turn the ankles a little bit as well. Let's get him standing there again. But really, it comes down to, that's a pretty nice pose right there. But what it comes down to for me is these arms. They just aren't that good. And I've taken quite a few pictures of this particular figure, put on my Instagram site. If you don't follow me on Instagram, feel free to. I take a lot of pictures of these figures. But maybe if we put him like this, a little bit more dynamic pose, his arms look a little bit more natural, and it gives you a decent pose. The head, again, maybe we pose him like this, and it looks as if, you know, he's got his blaster in the air. One of the things that is really nice, one of the things to do when you're aiming figures is make their arms straight. If they're aiming a blaster, most of the time it looks a lot better when their blaster is aimed straight. So there's the the First Order Stormtrooper. Let's just leave him there for a second, kind of set him off to the side a little bit, and let's take a look at the Imperial Stormtrooper. Now in this one, again, we can spread the legs out quite a bit. The knees bend very easily. I think that's a good thing. We still get the torso twist. Okay, he doesn't twist at the waist either, so it's just the torso twist. And one of the cool things, or one of the things I always recommend when you are posing your figures, very few people will. It'll be easier for me to do it like this. Very few people when they aim a gun are they like that, straight up and down with their gun sticking straight out. So give them something that's a little bit more dynamic. Turn the torso, spread the legs apart a little bit, turn that head. If we're aiming this, let's see what he looks like with his arm kind of sticking out. Let's have him aim with a straight arm as well. Let's see what he looks like. Turn this ankle just a little bit more. Sometimes trying to get these guys to stand up is a challenge. You really got to balance it out right. There. That's not too bad. That's a decent pose, not the best that I've ever had, for sure. But there he is, aiming with a straight arm. Now that I've messed him up, he doesn't want to stand up again. There we go. And let's go back to the first order, aiming, turn the torso, more of a straight arm pose, bend the knee a little bit. The nice thing about the first order Stormtrooper is he's got 2 bends in the knee, as opposed to just the one for the Imperial Stormtrooper. So that's a nice touch as well. All right, let's see if I can get him to stand up. Come on. There we go. So if I bring them over just a little bit, watch as I center them up and move them. They're going to fall over again. But we're just talking. That's all this is. There we go. Not bad pose for either one of these. I've definitely done better poses. But when it comes to posability, I have to give the nod to, well, this is a tough one. I really like the Imperial Stormtrooper because of the neck, and the arms are a little bit easier to get closer to the body. But I also think the lower half of the First Order Stormtrooper is a little bit better. It's got 2, as I knock them over here, beautiful. It's got 2 points of articulation in the knees, whereas I'm going to double check and make sure that I'm not lying to you here, but in the Imperial Stormtrooper, there's just 1 point of articulation, so there's not quite as much posability there. I think that if I were to give the nod, I'm going to call this a tie, because the lower half of the Imperial Stormtrooper is definitely inferior to the posability of the lower half of the First Order Stormtrooper, but the upper half I think is definitely better on the Imperial. So we're going to call this a tie. So the last thing that we'll do here is let's decide which one of these 2 figures gets the nod and wins this little head-to-head battle. All right, so here we go. When it comes to the head sculpt, I've got to give the nod to the First Order Stormtrooper. It's just a little bit better, mainly because of the paint job. The second thing, the body sculpt, I've got to give that to the Imperial Stormtrooper. He just is it just looks better and it matches very well. Third thing that we were looking at were the accessories. And when it comes to the accessories, and in this case, the 2 blasters, I've got to give the nod to the Imperial Stormtrooper, because I just can't believe that a Stormtrooper would go into battle with a 2-tone blaster. And then finally, we've got the posability. And this one turned out to be a little bit of a tie. The Imperial Stormtrooper kind of wins from the waist up, and the First Order Stormtrooper wins from the waist down because of the articulation in the knees. But I think that if I had to give a nod to one of these 2, they're both great looking figures. They're good for army builders. They're really good as well if you can customize figures and put some paint jobs and add some weathering, and they're really good for taking pictures. I got to give my nod to the Imperial Stormtrooper, and that has pretty much everything to do with nostalgia. For me, I grew up with the original trilogy, and I just like the look of the Imperial Stormtrooper better. So he's going to win this battle. I love this figure, and I hope to get my hands on more of them. I've got a few in my collection, but I want to get even more for my pictures. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Like this video, subscribe to this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this with anybody and everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.